So we have more teasers. Of course, this is teaser week. We're gonna have teasers just almost every day at this point, or basically it is every day because it is teaser week. So we have a lot of spell changes for death, and we're gonna be talking about that in this video. There has already been a video posted on the original creator's channel, and has posted his own set of teasers. He was given death teasers, and I'm gonna kind of like continue off that and like bounce a little bit more ideas and explain a little bit more things regarding shadow packs. I kind of did a similar thing with the balance, so if you haven't, check out that video of course and watch the original creators video when it comes to balance, but this one specifically death. And honestly, Ant did a pretty good job explaining everything regarding shadow packs. He talked about the spells and how you'd use them in certain ways and whatnot, and honestly he did a really good job, and I'm really proud of him. So shout out to Ant. He did, honestly, like really did a good job, and I know he's been asking me questions here and there regarding spells, so I've been trying my best to kind of explain that and rally that information. Just remember though that there's going to be plenty of teasers this whole week. We're going to have teasers basically every day regarding a lot of the shadow creatures transformation, and as well as like shadow fusion stuff. So there's gonna be videos basically every day from different creators. My video specifically on Storm is not till Sunday, so be on the lookout for that, and I'll try my best to explain everything regarding Storm in that video. So there's that information for you guys. So let's get into the death changes and talk about some extra things here and there. So first, let's go over shadow packs. In every video, I'm going to do my best to explain shadow packs and how the system works entirely. It's a new system. There's going to be a tutorial and everything like that in game, and I'm genuinely just really hoping that KI executes this pretty well and the tutorial shows everything that we need to know. But here's a graphic that shows what shadow packs are, and it shows the creature as well as the transformation that's going to be for the death stuff. And so it's basically shown with the death teasers, of course. So we have the shadow transformation, which is Shadow Shepherd. Of course, this is like similar to like Shrike and whatnot, where like, you know, you transform into a shadow form and you get buffs along with that transformation. So in this case, you're getting 55 outgoing death drain damage. So like, for example, you know how like you have frenzy that gives you like certain damage, just basically just gives you damage to like outgoing to like the next couple spells or whatnot for a set amount of rounds. This is giving you 55 outgoing damage specifically to death drain. So this is not an aura or whatnot. If it was an aura, it would have an icon of like a positive aura, but this is just strictly a stat buff, or what you call it, from this transformation. So just remember that. As well as you get +1 pip, and specifically it's going to be a death pip, so just keep that in mind. It's not going to just be a regular power pip. This is specifically a death pip, so you can combo with this if you are going to use any spells that have a death pip requirement. And then the shadow pact is you have to have negative charms on the enemy. So this doesn't mean I feel like I should probably preface this on the slides, because I've seen people confuse this and whatnot, but that every time there is a negative charm on the enemy, that doesn't mean you get the reward again and again. You're getting that reward as a one-time thing that's lasting a set amount of rounds, because in this case it's a transformation, right? So it's going to last a set amount of rounds. But that doesn't mean every time the creature the transformation takes away a negative charm off the enemy, that doesn't mean you get a power pip or specifically a death pip every time. I feel like that would be broken if that was the case. Getting the reward every round for meeting the conditional is kind of crazy if you just think about that. But basically, that is your reward for three rounds essentially. And every time you have a negative charm on the enemy, it will take one away. If there is no negative charm on the enemy, it's going to take 5% of your max HP at the end of the whole transformation. So just beware. It's kind of like Lash. I mean, I'm trying not to bring up the term Lash so much, but in a way, yes, it's kind of like Lash. But instead, you're starting out at 0%, and every time you fail that conditional, you lose 5% of your max HP. So hopefully we get like a good understanding of that. And then we do have the shadow creature, which is going to be used for the fusions. So just remember that if you want to combine any of your shad spells that currently exist in the game that originally had a shad, they're going to remove that shad, and now if you want to use a shad variation, you're going to have to combine it with the shadow creature. So the shadow creature, what it does, it will use 1 shad pip and it will do 75 shadow damage. Then it will proceed to put 3 -20% universal weaknesses on the target. And the shadow pact is having hots on the enemy. And honestly, this is one of the good shadow packs in my opinion, or like the shadow creatures, sorry. Now, because the fact that, well, it is, yes, kind of the shadow pack as well, but having haunts on the enemy with the amount of people that are using Tuara and the amount of people that are just heal spamming in PvP, and I witness it all the time, this is good. Being able to take away enemy haunt up to technically 3 times if they are having a haunt on them. If they're not going to do anything with it, you can just keep taking one away per round. This is really good. And on top of that, like you're putting 3 weaknesses on the enemy. Now, of course, every time you take away a haunt is not going to put additional 3 weaknesses. That would be broken, right? I feel like I need to start explaining that in videos, because yeah, the reward is a one-time reward. It's not like, hey, every time you clear a haunt, you get another 3 weaknesses on the enemy. That would be really broken. But still, this is a very good shadow creature, and honestly, it's basically a hit and shield. You know, if there's a shield, you break that shield and you put 3 weaknesses just like that, literally like that. And if they have a hot, you just keep removing it per round, 1 per round, of course. You're not going to remove all of the hots or anything like that. But there is a system explained note at the bottom. Pack system is 3 rounds. Pay 1 specific hanging effect at the start of each turn, and it will consume that hanging effect. So just remember that. If you do not have the requirement for the pack, you lose 5% of your max HP instead. The max amount of HP you can lose is minus 15% max HP. And you will lose the HP at the end of the 3 turns, or if combat is completed, or if you decide to replace the pack with a different one. So just remember that. And then of course the HP is not, or the HP loss isn't at the end of the round. The payment's at the end of the whole 3 rounds. So just keep that in mind when you are using shadow packs. And of course we do have like a slight little image on the right side, of course. Now let's talk about certain spells, right? So let's start off with Khrulhu. I feel like Lulu's like the best way to start this off, and that's kind of how I've been like setting up this system entirely, is just so it goes based upon the darkness spells that you get from the graveyard where you fight Mali and whatnot. So if we go over here to, where is it? Oh, Lulu right here. This is currently Call of Khrulhu in game. I always call it Khrulhu. You can call it whatever you want. I've always called it Khrulhu. But anyways, currently what it does in game is it's a Shad Pit, and it has 675 drain on everybody. And then of course, if you have the 1 spell limit that you get from PvP, you can convert it into this version of Khrulhu, where it's a select target, and it's I believe that's a 385, yeah, 385 death drain, and it puts a negative aura on the enemy. And that negative aura is a minus 30% outgoing. That is 4 rounds. Now, of course, if you split this amongst multiple targets, this utility is going to be slightly affected. So, of course, the more targets you split, of course, you're going to be doing less damage from like one target to another. And then on top of that, your aura is going to be technically a little bit less. The percentage will be a little bit low, and the aura conditional of how long it's going to last is going to be less. So just remember that when it comes to this stuff. I really hope in the future when you right click a card, it will tell you that information, but as of right now it doesn't. It's just kind of like a mental note that you have to remember. But let's see what they're doing with Khrulhu, and this will kind of set the tone for the rest of the video so you guys get a better idea of how it works. So here's an image of Khrulhu. You guys can see I made like a smaller image, kind of like what I did with Balance, and I'll be doing for every video. But the current paths are on the top left, and then at the bottom you guys can see what it will look like if you had Khrulhu in your hand as well as Dark Shepherd. Now you guys can see as well in the image the new paths as well as the shadow fusion of like the different paths of the fusion as well. So you can actually choose which fusion you want the outcome to be. So if you want your fusion to be the left one where it's like a 690 drain, you can pick that one. Or if you want the right one where it's a 605 drain and it has like the extra utility, you can pick that version as well. Now you can combine, for example, the left side of Khrulhu that does 315 drain and combine it with Dark Shepherd, and you can still have the outcome of the right variation of the shadow fusion. You get to pick your fusion. So no matter what path of Khrulhu you pick, you can still fuse it with Shepherd, and you can decide on what fusion you want based upon what you selected in your I guess deck, you can say. So something to be wary about. It's more of like a spell elemental path. You pick the spell elemental path, and that is what you're picking as your fusion, and that's going to be your outcome for the fusion every single time. So there's that. And this is a mock image, of course. It would look like in your deck, or in combat I mean, of if you had Khrulhu in your hand as well as Dark Shepherd. You're going to be using Dark Shepherd to fuse them. I know some people have the idea of you're going to need or you can just use any, but it wouldn't make sense because we've had fusion formulas in the past, and with Selenopolis specifically, and they require a specific spell. So If they made it so you can just use your own school one for all of them, that'd be kind of broken. So I think they made this way because, you know, it's a fusion. You know, you're going to need them with a specific formula, and you're gonna have to train the formula anyways from the tree or however they put it. Maybe it's not gonna be by the tree, maybe it's something else, but you're gonna have to train the formula anyways. So there is that. But the new path of Khrulhu without a shad is doing 315 death drain, and then the new advanced combat variation is doing 320 death drain, and it clears 2 hots on the enemies, or specifically, or yeah, the enemies, you can say, because it is a select target. And it puts a minus 30% chromatic weakness. So, for example, if you are fighting in ice, I've been using ice for like majority of my examples, it will put a minus 30% ice weakness. Now, of course, it clears up to 2. So if you clear 1, it will put 1 minus 30% chromatic weakness. If you clear 2 hots, you'll put 2 minus 30% chromatic weaknesses. So if you're fighting in ice, it'll put 2 weaknesses if you clear 2 hots, just as an example. Now, the advanced combat, or not the advanced combat, the shadow fusions, Lulu's, they look cool. Of course, I like the artwork, what they've done with the shad stuff. But the left fusion is going to do 690 death drain, and the conditional in this case for the shadow pact is you have to have hots on the enemy. So every time you do not have a hot on the enemy, you will lose 5% of your max HP. So be careful when using stuff like this, just because, hey, you have to have a hot on the enemy. That doesn't mean you give the enemy a hot. If the enemy that you're fighting is healing and putting healing overtimes on them, that's when you know you can pull out Lulu and you can use that in casual play. Of course, this is the banned version, for specifically like casual play, not advanced combat or PvP. But the advanced combat / PvP version allowed is doing 605 death drain, and then it puts 2 chromatic weaknesses on the target that are minus 40%. And then, of course, the pact is hot. So if you're fighting somebody that just used Tuaret or whatnot, or a rebirth, and you decide to pull this out, you can use it, and you'll take away 1 of their hots, 1 per round, up to 3. And if they don't have a hot, you will lose 5% of your max HP. Kind of straightforward. I'm trying my best to explain this. I know some people had some concerns in the comments, and honestly, I'm explaining to my best of my abilities and giving you guys visual images. And I know some people still have questions, and I try my best to answer them, whether it be in the Discord or whether it be in the comment section. Just try your best to listen along, and I'm explaining everything to the best of my abilities. Of course, whenever we get the tutorial in game, that will be the better explanation, of course, because you know, you'll actually experience it in game. But this is like anytime there's a new system. Same thing whenever Archmastery came out, same thing when we had fusions. It takes time. You know, you're not going to just see it off the rip and just understand it. Some people are like that and they can understand it right away, and some people it takes some time. So it's kind of understandable, you know. But there's that for Lulu, and let's move on to other spells that have been changed as well, because it isn't just Lulu that got changed. Basically, any shad enhanced spell got changed, so we'll talk all about that. If you guys have made it this far into the video, just wanted to remind you guys that 75% of you guys that watch me on a daily basis are not subscribed. So do me a huge favor and subscribe. We're on that grind to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Alright, now let's get back into the rest of the video. Let's start off with Winged Sorrow. Now, Winged Sorrow did get us changes. So if we look at Winged Sorrow currently as it exists in the game, at max tier, it is doing 845 death damage to 1025 death damage. So that's the range, and then it puts a plague on everybody essentially, which is a minus 20% universal weakness, and then 6 pips as well as a shad. Then we had the advanced combat variation, which it would do 615 death damage, and then put a negative aura on the enemy that was a minus 65% incoming for 6 rounds, and specifically healing. So if someone's trying to heal, it's basically they have like an infection aura on them, so they will be getting less healing from that whole spiel because they have that negative aura on them, unless they got rid of it. But we do have 2 new variations, or I guess you can say 4 in total, of Winged Sorrow. So now let's look over at the new Winged Sorrow, which is Top Path. It's 6 pips, no longer has the shad, and it's doing 455 death damage as a singular target, and they decided to still keep the minus 20% weakness on it for all targets. And honestly, surprise, surprise, I think this is good. This is actually allowed in advanced combat and along in like challenge modes and whatnot and raids, and actually this has some use. You can do some damage and you can put a minus 20% weakness on everybody, and thank god it isn't like a select target. I'm hoping we do not get select target V plagues and plagues. I don't want to think about it. Or same thing with like Legion Shields, I don't want select target Legion Shield, but Hopefully that doesn't happen anytime soon or whatnot. But the fact that this is just putting a plague on everybody, I think this is great. I think top path is great. It's going to be usable. I know some people might have like different ideas of this is actually going to be usable for PvE players, of them just questing and whatnot. And if we think about it, if you look at your guys' 6 pips, right, if we just quickly venture on in back to live realm, you have Wraith, which is doing 555, and it's a drain, which is just outright better. So don't worry about using Wing Sara, in my opinion, too much when it comes to casual play, because you guys do have access to Wraith, and as well as Pirates doing more. But just remember, though, that Wing Sara does give a utility on it, so hey, we're just going to put that out there. Now, if we venture back into the graphic, now there's the path B of Wing Sara, which is pretty good. It's pretty good, in my opinion. I mean, hey, maybe you have different arguments. But it's doing 455 death damage as well, so they're keeping the death damage being still the same. But what it now is doing, it clears up to 5 blades, and it puts a minus 25% weakness on the target. So per clear, you can put a minus 25% weakness on the target. So if they have 5 blades, so this is like, for example, if you're blade stacking, if you're a myth that's blade stacking against this death, for example, you can clear 5 of their blades and put a minus 25% weakness per. Now, of course, now myth has access to like weakness counters, so just beware of that. But certain schools that are trying to blade stack are going to be, you know, fried by this as well. This is a good spell just to even use, for example, on Montgomery. I'm just gonna put this out there because Montgomery does tend to blaze ban. You know, that's his whole gimmick. You know, nerf storm, whatnot. So this is actually good for like a fight like that, just as an example, right? But still, very good in my opinion. Now let's venture into the fusion portion, the shadow fusion. So now if you have any variation of Wing Sara and you combine it with Dark Shepherd, you can get these shadow fusions. Of course, the outcome of the shadow fusion is going to be based upon what you choose. So if you want to have two let's see, tier 2 but path B Wing Sara, you can combine any variation of Wing Sara to get that outcome. You just have to have it selected on your spelemental paths. So if you look at max tier path A fusion of Wing Sara, it is doing 1.1k, and then it puts a minus 20% weakness on all targets. So no increase to the utility, but a huge increase to the damage as a whole. And if we look at it, Wing Sara currently in game, without me like switching the like a slide, Wing Sara at max tier, it has a range of 845 to 1k. So this is actually stronger than the original Wing Sara that was allowed in the casual play. So definitely a buff. And the shadow pact is you have to have blades on the enemy. So if the enemy that you're fighting doesn't have blades, you will proceed to lose 5% of your max HP per turn that they don't have a blade. So you are starting off with technically a 0% lash, and every time you fail the conditional for 30 rounds, you lose 5% of your max HP up to 15%. So you want to make sure when you do toss this out, there is at least blades on the enemy, and they're kind of just staying there, and you can, you know, remove one blade at a time. Now, every time you remove one blade, that does not mean you're putting another weakness on them. No, the top path or the top part of the card is just what it's doing, and you have to fulfill the conditional per round. Just because you fulfill the conditional, that doesn't mean you get an additional reward. That just means you're not losing HP. That's really what that means. So that's Wing Sara path A fusion. And then if we move on to the path B, which is the one that's allowed in advanced combat, challenge modes, raids, whatnot, PvP, it is doing 855 death damage, and then it's putting 2 minus 45% weaknesses. And the shadow pact is you still gotta have blades on the enemy. Every time you remove one blade, that just means you don't lose 5% of your max HP. But like I said earlier, if they don't have a blade, you will be losing 5% of your max HP per round. So there is that. When it comes to Wing Sara, honestly, I think that's if we're comparing it to the regular variation of Wing Sara, I think it's just out of that and the Shadow Pact variation, I honestly think that just base Wing Sara is actually better than the one that's the Shadow Fusion. I mean, hey, you can make the argument of it being a 45% weakness, but at the same time it depends on who you're fighting realistically. When it comes to like raids, challenge modes, honestly, there isn't no use currently for some of this stuff. And how often you're getting a shad, you know, it always bounces back to the argument of shads and whatnot, and the consistency of them. So there's that. And just always remember, when I talked about these fusions, this means we are getting spellements on our fusions, so be wary of that. You would want to farm ahead of time. We don't know what the requirements are, what spell elements they are. We just know that's going to be a combination of the regular spell element as long as with some other stuff. So we don't know if it's only going to be like one spell element per tier, or if it's going to be the same tier progression how it's always been. So just make sure you have a lot of your spell elements ahead of time, because we are going to need more spell elements, which is kind of crazy to even think about. So maybe those 999 spell elements aren't going to waste after all. But hey, I guess we're going to go back to grinding. Now let's move on to the next death spell that got changed, which was Kismah's Curse. Now Kismah, I feel like I haven't seen too often be used. The top path, of course, is a divide. I'm not a fan of divides. I've always genuinely not been a fan of divides. Some of these spells should just be an AoE for top path and just ban them. And you guys will see what I'm talking about. But yeah, no, this at max tier, it's doing 785, but it's a divide. So you can use it as a single target hit, or you can divide it against multiple targets. And this is divide, not split target, divide. So literally just half it every time. Split, when it comes to like split targeting, like this, or select targeting, sorry, it's actually going to be more forgiving, while divide is literally just half, half, half. While, for example, selected targets is actually being a little bit more forgiving. So there's that. But Path B, what it currently does in game, is doing 345 death damage and then 245 death blades. But you are using a shad, so we're just going to put that out there. Now let's look at the new Kismah's Curse, which you guys can see of why I'm talking about how we need... I feel like the four top paths should just be AoEs, because it's doing 370 death damage and it's a select target and it's 4 pips. Or, yeah. Like, what? I mean, am I the only one that thinks that this should be an AoE? I mean, at least it'll have more utility, or like more viability. I just don't like how this... I just don't like what it is right now. Like, I don't know. I'm just really not a fan of Path A. But Path B, what it does is it does 285 death damage, and then it proceeds to gambit 2 blades. So if you have 2 separate blades on you, every time you gambit a blade, it will put a minus 70% shield, which is just basically a tower shield. That's just a minus 70%. So it's going to... So let's say, for example, let's just say you have 2 death blades on you. Or actually, no. Let's just say you have 2 ice blades on you for some reason, right? And I use this spell. It's going to remove one of those ice blades and put a shield. Now, if I had 2, it's going to remove actually 2 of those ice blades and put 2 shields on me. The cap is 2. It's not going to just... Like, if you have more blades, it doesn't mean it's going to remove all your blades. It only does it up to 2 times. So there's that. In a way, this is kind of like A-bomb. So it's a 4 pip A-bomb if you think about it. But that one actually has some sort of utility when it comes to that. It's a minus 70% shield. You know, like, that's pretty insane just to even think about. But now let's move on to the fusion variation, the shad fusions, which is if you have your Dark Shepherd and you combine it with Kismah's Curse, whatever Kismah Curse, and you get access to these shadow fusions. Now, of course, depending on the path that you pick, that will be the outcome of your fusion. So if we chose Path A, for example, Path A is doing 900 death damage, and then it's putting a singular minus 75% tower shield, and then the shadow pact is you have to have blades on yourself. So once per round, up to 3 rounds, it will take a blade off of you. If you do not have a blade, it will take away your health. So you kind of have to play accordingly, because for example, if I have blades on myself, toss out this spell, and then for some reason the enemy removes all my blades, yeah, next round I'm losing 5% of my max HP if I don't act properly. So you kind of are still giving its likes and whatnot, so there's that. And then you have the Path B Shadow Fusion of Kismah's Curse, which is doing 565 death damage, and then it's proceeding to put 3 minus 70% shields. And then just remember, it is taking away 1 blade per round up to 3 rounds, and if you do not have a blade on you, it's taking away your HP. So just remember to fulfill the Shadow Pact needs, kind of like its likes. You better be giving it its likes. If not, you will be losing your HP. So just remember that. So if you have like for example, like an LE blade on you, it'll just take 1 blade away from that LE blade per round, so you don't have to worry about it. But if someone removes your LE blades in that time frame of you still having this packed up, you can lose your HP because of it if you don't play properly. So just be wary about that. And then when it comes to raids and whatnot, I'll be honest, we're not using this. We're just not, because like I said, still argument applies. Shadow raid needs to be looked into. Like, it just genuinely needs to be. I don't feel like it's as... Like, these are powerful, don't get me wrong, but like if I'm not getting consistent shads in majority of these fights that are like 5-6 rounds, yeah, I'm not going to be using Kismahs, for example. Like, I don't need to. I really don't. but that's just my take right now. Now let's move on to Snack Attack. Now, Snack Attack did get some changes as well. I mean, I know a lot of people are looking forward to it because it is an AoE, right? Snack Attack, what it currently does in game is, and you have to remember this too, what they did with, I believe this is caramel spells. Yeah, caramel spells. They started off as 5 pips and they slowly progressed into higher pips. So it started off as 5, then 6, and then at max tier became a 7, right? 3, 4, and 5 are 7 pips. So it became a 7 pip plus a shad, and it would push a negative charm. So if you had a negative charm, let's just say you had a minus 90 weakness, you can use this and push the minus 90 weakness to the enemy, and then it will do damage, which was a really good spell. And honestly, to this day, in my opinion, this top path is still really good. If you're ever fighting a boss and they have those cheats where they just put V plagues or something like that, and that stops you in a track and you have to, like, you know, get rid of the weakness, just push it over. Yeah, just push it over and you're fine. Literally, you're fine. So and this was an AoE, of course, just remember that. So it was an AoE that pushed the negative charm, and then it would do 730 damage through the range of 850. And then the bottom path was stealing blades off the enemy and doing damage, which was a 5 pip. And it was doing 460 damage. So that was Snack Attack currently in game. Now, if we look at the new Snack Attack that doesn't have a shad, it's still pushing that negative charm. So it's not allowed in advanced combat, so you do have to be wary about that. And what it does is it pushes that negative charm, and it's doing 505 death damage. Now that is a pretty solid amount of death damage, if I do say so myself. Now this is actually doing more damage than Wobbegong Frenzy, and Wobbegong Frenzy is 430 death damage, and as well as it has a school pip, which is kind of crazy. I don't think this is valued properly, in my opinion, because how is a spell that has 5 pips doing more damage than a spell that's doing 3 pips and a school pip that's doing the same exact thing, but Snack Attack has a utility? Yeah, I mean, this is a good 1-round spell. Like, if you're using this round 1, you can use this. It's better than Wobbegong. Is generally better than Wobbegong. And then if you even compare it to, for example, I know some people are gonna be like, well, what about Deer Knight, Almond? What about Deer Knight? If you're using the middle path version of Deer Knight, at max tier is 325, and I know some people are like, why would I use the middle path? I can just use the top path. The reason why you use the middle path, in my opinion, right, it's just Almond's opinion, which is why I use it, is when you enchant with Epic, it goes straight to the initial hit. Well, if you enchant the top path of Deer Knight with Epic, it splits the Epic between the hit and the poison, like the AoE poison, right? So that's why I always use the middle path for just a straight hit. But Snack Attack is doing more damage than Deer Knight and more damage than Wobbegong Frenzy when it has a school pip. So I think this is an error, personally. And if it isn't, I mean, I'm all for it. I mean, it's a new, better AoE that Death can use, and it pushes a negative charm. So, like, huh? But let's venture back into the graphic. Now we can talk about the path D, which is doing 525 death damage, and then it's gambiting a shield up to 3 times, and you get 55 blades. Yeah. This is just basically a ghoul, because currently we have ghoul in the game, and path B ghoul is a drain, and then it gambits a shield and it gives you a 55 blade. But now you can use Snack Attack for 5 pips, do slightly more damage, and every time you gambit a shield, you get a 55 blade. So if you gambit 3 shields, you can have 3 55 blades. That's pretty good, but honestly, it's kind of a little bit too early to tell, because the fact is, we're getting a lot of spell changes. There's gonna be so many hanging effects in matchups now, and as well as, like, I'm kind of concerned of what the boss fights are even gonna look like for I was about to say Silent Outpost, but for Darkmoor, because with the amount of hanging effects that are at play, who knows how good these spells would be. But still, very good, very good. At least it's not chromatic blades, because I know some people were kind of scared that this was going to be chromatic, and thank God it's not chromatic, I will say. Now let's venture into the Shadow Fusion of Snack Attack. Of course, we'll talk about it once more. You will have to farm spell elements for this, for the fusion, which I'm hoping Cam will kind of elaborate more on Thursday or Sunday. But yes, you will need spell elements, and it will require an additional spell elements and combine it with something else to make shadow fusion spell elements. And then, of course, depending on the fusion outcome you choose, you can combine whatever variation of snack attack, and that would be your fusion outcome, depending on what you chose on your spell writing tab. So just remember that. But whenever you combine snack attack with dark shepherd, you can have the top path variation of snack attack, which is pushing a negative charm, and then what it proceeds to do is 915 death damage. What? There's 915 death damage, and then it's a shadow pact of having shield on yourself. So every time you don't have a shield on you, you will lose 5% of your max HP, starting from obviously the following round, whatnot. So just remember that when you're using snack attack, if you don't have shields on you, of course it will take away 1 shield per round. It's not going to take the whole spell. So if you elemental shield, for example, it's not going to take all your elemental shields on the beginning of round 1. It'll only take 1 at a time. So it'll take 1, the following round will take the other, and the third round will take the other. So straightforward. You can kind of easily set that up if you think about it. But whenever you don't have a shield, you will lose 5% of your max HP. Then there's the bottom path variation, which is doing 700 death damage, and then on top of that, it's giving you 350% death blades, and then it will take away a shield off of you 1 per round, of course, and every time you don't fill that condition, you will lose 5% of your max HP. Now, honestly, I think out of the snack attack variations, I still think gambling the shields is better than just removing a 1 per round, because yes, you're enhancing with the shad variation, it will do more damage, but the thing is you're going to be losing 3 shields anyways from the shadow pact, right? And if you just use the non-shadow pact version of snack attack, it's going to do better death blades. It's giving you 55 death blades instead of 50. So I think snack attack as a whole, it might need to be a slight reevaluation in my opinion, of course. And whenever spells do get a reevaluation, I will talk about it. But yeah, the base version of snack attack is actually just outright better. But path A, very good for casual play. Path B, very good for the conditional, and it's just better than the shadow pact variation in my opinion. Like, yeah, you can increase the damage by a little bit, but why not just use base snack attack realistically? That's just my take. And now let's move on to the final spell that was changed for death, which was Grim Reader, which I know a lot of people were looking forward to because they saw what they did with Headless and people were scared of what they're going to do with Grim Reader. And what Grim Reader does at max tier for Path A, just remember though, it did get progression tiers where it would increase the pip value. So it started off as a 6 pip, then 7 pip, and then it maxed out as an 8 pip at tier 5, doing 1.1k death damage, and then it would put 2 minus 25% weaknesses. And it was a shad pip and it did require 8 pips. And then Path B, which a lot of people use in Peeve, which was 6 pips with a shad, doing 600 death damage, and then putting true chromatic weaknesses on the enemy. So, for example, if you're fighting ice, it would be ice weaknesses. If you're fighting a death, it would be death weaknesses. So, that's what chromatic means right here. Assumes the magic score of the target. So, that's what Grim Reader was originally doing in Live Realm. Now, what the new Grim Reader is doing without a shad is top path is doing 6 pips, or it being 6 pips, sorry, and then it's doing 455 death damage, and then proceeding to give minus 25% weaknesses that are 2 of them. So if we're comparing that to regular Grim Reader that currently exists in the game, right, when it comes to the top path at least, is doing way less damage. And even if we use tier 1 Grim Reader, which is a 6 pip, tier 1 Grim Reader with a shad was doing 890. This is doing 455. So kind of a huge damage loss. And then what Path B is doing, it is putting, or it's doing 455 death damage, and then every time you gambit a shield, so it will remove a shield off you, and it will put a minus 45% chromatic weakness on the target, which is really good as well. You will be sacrificing a lot of shields, so you'll be seeing death's shield spam like crazy in this like new era at this point. Just shields are going to go crazy, and a lot of hanging effects are going to be happening on the field, so just keep that in mind as a whole as well. But still, 455. And also there is a text error if you look properly on Grim Reader, because I don't think anyone realized this either, but at tier 3 it's doing 455, but if you look at tier 4 it's doing 265, but at tier 5 it's going back down to 455. So definitely some text errors on death spells, I will say. I feel like that's supposed to be 475, but I mean, hey, maybe it's a little bit a bit different, but there is text errors on that Grim Reader, I will say. So hopefully they fix that, and I think they should probably address it at some point. But yeah, no, that needs to be slightly adjusted. But still, it's a very good spell. You can gamble your shields and then put weaknesses on the target, and it's going to be annoying. It's just going to be annoying. And then we do have the fusion variation of Grim Reader, which does require Dark Shepherd. You can fuse with whatever Grim Reader you want, and it'll be the outcome of whatever outcome you chose on your spell writing. But at max here for Path A, it is doing 1.1k and then putting 2 minus 25% weaknesses. So if you really consider what Grim Reader is doing in live realm currently, for 8 pips, it's doing 1.1k, but it's like 1175. But the new Grim Reader is doing 1195. So it is a buff, and you know, if you do use it for PvE while you're questing and whatnot, it's genuinely a buff. You got a slight damage increase, and it's gonna cost 1 less power pip. Currently in game, it's 8 pips and a school pip, or 8 pips in a shadow pip. Now it's 6 pips in a shadow pip, and it's doing it's doing actually better damage than what it currently is doing in live realm. So that's something to keep a note of. And just remember, the shadow pact is you gotta have shield on yourself. So every time you don't have shields on yourself, at least like 1, you will lose 5% of your max HP. So let's say round 1 I had a shield, it'll take it away. Round 2, let's say I didn't have a shield, it's going to take away 5% of my max HP. So that's how that works. Then if you look at Path B Grim Reader, it's doing, or the Shadow Fusion of Grim Reader, it's doing 880 death damage, and then it puts 3 minus 45% chromatic weaknesses on the target. So this is actually stronger than the Grim Reader that currently exists in game. The weaknesses got buffed by 5%, and instead of putting 2, you're putting 3. And then on top of that, it's taking away shield off of you 1 per round, and if you don't, you lose 5% of your max HP. So this is a buff than the Grim Reader that currently exists in the game, and the damage is doing not like 280 more. So there's that. But honestly, it really depends on how people are going to view this. Because I personally think the weaknesses that you get from the non-shad version of Grim Reader should be 40%. And I think the ones that you get from the fusion should be 45. So you can see a buff in that. But I don't know why Grim Reader Path B is being 45% weaknesses. I think that's too strong for its regular without the shad, but the shadow fusion 100% should be 45%. So I think there needs to be some slight changes on Grim Reader and some slight changes to snack attack, because yeah, for obvious reasons, the base snack attack is doing way more damage than we're supposed to, and then of course Path B snack attack without the shad pip is just better blades, right? I feel like the blade percentages should be swapped. I think snack attack, when you gambit a shield, should be 50% blades, but then if you have the shadow pact variation where you combine it with the shadows, with the dark shepherd, those should be 55 blades. I think those should be slight changes in my opinion, but that's really all I have when it comes to death spells. But those are all the changes for death spells. You guys let me know your thoughts and opinions down below of what you guys think. I know there's some spell text error on some of these spells, and I still think snack attack is obviously not valued properly. I mean, hey, I'm all for overpowered spells in PvE, don't get me wrong, bro. I literally use Incendiate all the time. I literally break fights half the time, so I'm all for it. But just as like a Wiz standpoint, I'm pretty sure that snack attack is overvalued, because it's doing more damage than Wobblegong Frenzy. It's doing more damage than Deer Knight. I know Deer Knight gives you utility, but Wobblegong doesn't, so Wobblegong should be doing more. But yeah, I don't think snack attack should be doing that much. I don't know. Y'all can let me know in the comments down below of what you guys think of all the death changes. So hopefully I explained everything properly. And once again, definitely check out the original video from the content creator that did tease all this. So Amp posted his video and he explained things pretty well. Honestly, I'm really proud of him. Just I want to put that out there. And look out for more teasers that are coming out later this week, of course, as well. And then mine will be on Sunday, of course. And plenty of more teasers. Literally, test rounds legit around the corner. And I will be streaming the whole process of me on Darkmoor and whatnot. So there's that. But that is it for me. Leave a like, subscribe, all type of stuff. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out, guys.